Hello everyone and welcome to the podcast today. Now we come to today's topic. I will start with today's episode with the chart in which there are a total of 80 columns equivalent to 80 years of life for the vast majority of us. Choosing the number 80 is because according to statistics, the average life expectancy of Vietnamese people is about 75 years old, exactly 75.3 years old. However, we take the milestone as 80, but starting after the age of 70 is when our health begins to decline. At that time, frankly speaking, we are also rearranging and preparing. Divide everything in the world into this period of time. For the vast majority of us, whether we are rich or poor, whether we are billionaires or employees, by then our lives will be almost the same, I know. There are stories about starting a business at the age of 60 to 70, and I also know there are sayings like it's never too late to start something, but those are special cases, and the truth is for the vast majority of us, we can temporarily consider this period as the door of life that gradually closes, almost too late to do anything else. Surely there will be people who live longer. However, for the vast majority of us, after the 70th milestone, each day that passes is like an added gift, so we don't expect much at this stage, so I will mark this period of time. This is a time when everyone is the same. Next on the opposite end is the period of time in the first year of life. These years and months for the vast majority of people, our lives will be the same for most of us in this period of time. The only job is to go to school, and the goal of this stage is to complete that single job very well, so except for difficult cases or especially wealthy people, the rest is for everyone. For most of us, this stage is the same, so I also deducted this amount. Now that we have eliminated the period where most of us do not have such a choice, we are left with the time in between, and this is the time that we can control. My life. Assuming we don't have any sudden illness or accident and we are lucky to live this entire period of time, we will have a total of 52 years to live our lives. Then let's try observe how people often live their 52nd year of life. When we are 18 years old, which is also the time we finish high school, for the vast majority of people, the next goal will be university, except for some special cases that do not go to university because there may be reasons due to academic ability or finances. For the vast majority of people, the default next path will be to continue studying at university. At this time, we are faced with one of the most important decisions in our lives, which is choosing a career to study. The reason why I say it is important is because this decision will affect the long-term future of a country. The problem here is that when we are too young, we don't have enough awareness and experience to like any field. There are people who have gone through half their lives and still don't really know is what they like and what they want. Therefore, it is difficult to ask 18-year-olds to determine what they are passionate about and pursue. But there will be some cases where they can find their passion in the things they do. This is the first year of life, but this will be a special case. Most people at this time do not know what they want, let alone those two sublime words, passion. That's why when you study abroad, when you finish high school and don't immediately go to university, you will have some gap years. And because you yourself are still very unclear about what you want for your life, when faced with such an important thing, most of you will choose what you want for your life. The industry is based on a number of factors. The first example is based on academic ability, aiming at which school you can afford to pass and apply to. The second is to look at which profession has a future, and the future here is the profession that is hot in society, the professions that create a lot of income later, and the third is the influence from parents and other people, other adults in the household. And this case is actually not very different from the above case. Because as parents, we also guide our children to majors in which they have a lot of potential in society, such as business administration, engineers, or doctors. There are even some cases where you will choose to follow the general trend of your friends. In short, these choices are not based on whether you understand yourself or not and what you really want. No, it's from an outside influence. Or a little luckier is that they consider what they want, but this also goes back to the original problem. At this age, children have not yet experienced enough thinking and are not deep enough to be able to make such an important decision. But that split-second decision can affect our future lives so much that I'll tell you a story. As for me, I work in the IT industry, and I talked to an employee who did not directly report to me. But she often confided and talked to me to ask for advice. After a period of discussion, it became clear that this girl did not like programming, she only liked cooking. But instead of going to culinary school to become a chef, I chose to study IT for some reasons. It is due to the influence of family, friends and even my own thoughts that information technology has a better future than being a chef. After 4 years of college, after graduating, I quickly applied for programming jobs like my other friends. Then I started programming for a while, but because I basically didn't like this job, I wasn't interested in learning more deeply, so frankly speaking, my programming ability was the same as other people. You are different but nothing special. In this case, I was determined to change and now I'm working in a pretty big restaurant. Sometimes when I return to Vietnam, I also stop by the restaurant to visit her. She often brags to me that she is currently very happy with her job. I also told you that you should not regret the 4 years of college that you missed because life is a series of days when you experiment and correct mistakes. Rarely can anyone do something right away. From the beginning, okay. Those 4 years were the 4 years I experimented and learned that IT was not for me, and in addition, in this era, IT knowledge is always useful knowledge. If it is not complementary, it will. On the other hand, that is her case and I consider her case a special case. Because I can change and start over from scratch so early. In other cases, it is very easy to follow inertia after 4 years of university, after holding an information technology engineering degree in hand. It is not uncommon to apply to work as a kitchen assistant for restaurants. Okay, so after finishing school, most people will continue to work in the field they studied. After that, the more experience you have, the harder it will be to give up and start over, not to mention the worry of making money. It will make changing this industry even more difficult because everything is different. So the longer we do it, the more we get used to it, and from there, everyday tasks become easier. Besides, the longer we work, the more our remuneration will gradually increase, which will create a barrier. With the mentality that, oh well, I have a stable job that many people dream of, don't stand on this mountain and look at that mountain, and just like that, it gradually makes us forget what it feels like to be exhausted. I give myself a job that I am passionate about, and only when we work in such a state can we create special achievements. Otherwise we will always be at an average level. Jar. And because of such difficult reasons, except for a very small group of people who dare to throw away everything to rebuild from scratch, the rest will be the majority who grit their teeth and continue doing what they love. The more you do it, the more experience you get. The older I get, the harder it is to start over, and just like that, looking back, I've spent my entire life doing something that I don't necessarily hate but don't necessarily like either. Then there is still a career path. Now let's try to look at another path of these people, which is the path of love and family. Starting from college years, or for those who are a little later, after college you start to know and fall in love with someone. After experiencing it a few times, you will have love that lasts a little longer. And after you've known each other for a few years, you start to feel more or less pressured by your family. At a lighter level, the more serious suggestions would be to urge you to get married soon. This especially often happens to girls, even to the point where they are afraid of family gatherings on holidays because they are exhausted. One person after another asked about husband and children, as if the default thing is that at that age you obviously have to have a family, but even if no one is forcing you, you yourself have the default thinking. The thing is, we've known each other for a long time, obviously the next step will be getting married. From those internal thoughts plus external influences, we'll get married and get married. Years. And by default, the next thing will be having children, and the faster this happens, the more impact it has on both sides of the family, and so having children obviously have to raise children. After a few years, the child will grow up a bit and will be ready to raise another child so he can have a brother and sister. After the children start going to school, you will start the cycle of choosing a school and sending your child to school. Learn more. Learn less so that it has good results, so that you can be proud of your surroundings, and during that time, you still continue to do the job that we just talked about at the beginning. A job that you don't necessarily hate, but you also don't necessarily like. Especially now when you have to have finances to take care of your family, it becomes even more difficult to change it when your children start to grow up. You start with the story of choosing a school for your child at this time, but looking back at your life, it's nothing special. So you decide to make your child truly special and then put the pressure on. Her role forces her to go to prestigious schools, and sometimes she forgets to ask her what she likes. Then when she goes to college, she starts to have a lover. After falling in love for a while, she urged her to get married, and finally she got married. Then after a while she urged her to have a child. When she had a child, it was just right that we entered the retirement stage and began to move to the retirement stage. Keep me. Keep him for a while and then we pass the 70th milestone and consider our life complete. This is a very common story that we often see around us, and throughout these stories we see a word that is repeated many times in these lives. That default is obvious. By default, after finishing high school, you will continue to study at university, and by default, after knowing each other for a few years, you will have to consider getting married. Then it is obvious that if we get married for a few years we must have children. So our lives follow a pre-programmed formula to this stage. We will do this after finishing this job, we will do this. Continue the other thing. Here I absolutely do not mean to say that this road is a bad road, but even that this road is a beautiful road. Family happiness is a very wonderful happiness for many people, and for these people, raising a family, raising children and finding joy in family happiness is something that brings them satisfaction. So there is nothing bad about this path. If it is the path you really want, since you guys proactively choose it, it will be a very wonderful path with nothing wrong with this formula. I can tell a completely different story after high school years. You have clearly identified your passion for something, for example, IT, for example. Then you go to college, major in IT, then graduate and do your major, and every day you get to do what you love, and at the same time, you get to know someone, and after a while of knowing each other, you feel your happiness needs to go to a new level. They feel that the desire to build a family together is not based on inertia or pressure from anyone, but they both have the desire to devote their whole heart and soul to building a family. Give birth to children and raise them to be good people and enjoy it. If everything comes from your desire, then this is a very beautiful path. However, we ask the question of what percentage of people are like that and what percentage of people are going this path because of inertia. What I want to say here is that the formula is not the only formula for everyone, as in a previous podcast episode 1 once said, there will be people who find joy in the formula, raising a family, but there are also people who find joy in other aspects, such as work or research. It could be music or business. Regarding the emotional aspect, they only need a partner, or even simpler, a girlfriend or boyfriend. And it would be very harmful to put these people in a family life like the other common scenario, because it would create more unhappy families, and the person themselves would not be happy, but they will make your wife or husband unhappy, and your children will not be happy when they grow up. The beauty of life is that it has countless ingredients that we can reduce and create our own formula for life, so we don't necessarily have to live according to the general formula somehow available. Next, now you can imagine that our life is a walk in a park, and in a normal park we have one day to play, and in this park we with a total of 52 years in this park. We have many games from business to research, sports, and about family love. However, now imagine as soon as you step through the door and you are forced to play 3 games: sleeping, eating, and traveling. Sleeping is mandatory to play this game. If we sleep for 8 hours a day, it will take us 30% of our total time, and the same goes for eating. If we can't play, we eat 3 meals a day. Each meal is about half an hour to 1 hour. So temporarily consider the total time to be 2 hours for 3 meals, and every day we lose 10%. The next is walking, and I include activities like bathing, wash or sanitize. So, the total of these activities I consider taking at least 1 hour per day is considered an additional 5%. So in total, without playing anything, we have spent 45% of our time, and the remaining time is the time when we are free and proactive in designing our lives. And for each game like that, we can choose to play depending on the level from low to high. For example, a game to make money. If we only play at the minimum level, which is enough to make money, it takes about 8 hours a day, equivalent to 8 hours of work. These 8 hours are equivalent to 30% of our total time. But it's not because we go to work every day, because we also have Saturday off, Sundays and holidays. So let's say this minimum will take more than 20% from us, and similarly, whoever spends more time making money will get 30% like that. So the group is more and more passionate about working. So if this group is all in, every day they work more than 12 hours, this group will be 50%. And similarly we have the game of family. If anyone chooses a single life, they will spend 0% on this. They will have time for other things, but in return they will not get any joy from this family aspect. Life is ultimately a series of trade-offs. Next, if you choose to have a lover, it will take about 20% of your time. This is the minimum level one will use as an example. Telling your lover to only give them 20% of your time every day is probably a bit dangerous. The next level will be having a partner, means living together. This level will cost about 30%, and the all-in level for this family card includes children. And anyone who plays this level can say that it will take up all of our remaining time. However, I take that figure as 50%. And now, according to the popular life that we now talk about, this is the way everyone plays the game of their lives. The first 3 games, we have no choice, everyone has to play whether they want to or not. Is not. The next game that everyone chooses is family, and as we said earlier, they are all in for this game, and because they are all in for this family game, they won't have much time left to play. Other games only have enough time to play the lowest level of the game to make money for 8 hours a day. Try to make sure it's enough to support the first game, which is a family game. In fact, if you take out your computer and add it up, after playing the family game, it will take up 85% of it. The game makes money at the minimum level, it has lost 20%, which means there is a shortage of 5%, which means that if there is enough time to play the minimum level of this money-making game, the only way is to cut the part somewhere. Or eating and drinking. That's also the reason why people who follow this formula often fall into a state of stress and lack of time to take care of themselves, and it's also the reason why we often hear the saying that it's okay. Once we have a family, things like hobbies or passions become very distant things. Of course, these are examples, the numbers in these cards are not 100% accurate, and I also understand that not everything is as black and white as that. It is not that just having a family means not doing anything else, but I think it's not too far from the real picture. Through the example above, I want to share with you 2 ideas. The first is that everything in life must have trade-offs. If we are all in on something, we must trade off somewhat in the remaining things, and the second thing I want to say is that life has many other materials that we can choose and design for our lives. The 5 cards, family, making money, traveling, eating, sleeping, are not the only 5 cards we have to choose. We should proactively choose the ingredients we want and then design our own lives, because if we don't proactively do that, society will automatically apply a common formula. So our lives, and that will be the time when we no longer control our lives. We can absolutely live a life like no other. As long as it brings us happiness and it doesn't harm others, it doesn't matter if it's weird or if it's as strange as a machine. As long as it's the life you want, it's fine. Let's not care about formulas or preconceived notions, and let's not live by inertia, because when we look at the chart in today's episode, we can see the time. We don't have much in this life, so we try to design our lives so that at the end of the day, when we step out of the park, we can smile. Laughed, and we had a wonderful day in the park. When I was young, my father often taught me to live in a way that when I'm lying in bed on my last days, I can still smile, and I believe that is the final destination of all of us. Before I did this episode, I thought a lot. I'm not a famous person, but I'm also aware that a certain number of people are following me. So I feel that I have to be responsible for what I share, so that if it does not bring positive values, at least it should not create negative things. So it should be. When thinking about this episode, I hesitated, not knowing whether to do it or not, because I didn't want to create negative things for those who were going the above path. In the end, I will still do this episode because I believe the positives it brings will outweigh the negatives. I hope you all feel the same way. Wishing you a very happy day with your family and loved ones. See you guys again in the next episode.